You know, there are things that are better left untouched. There are places that are better left undiscovered. I learned that rule for the rest of my life 3 years ago. And what I lived through still makes me wake up at 3 in the morning in a cold sweat, frantically checking if the front door is locked. My name is Mike, and this is not another creepypasta from the internet. This happened to me in northern Maine, in the middle of nowhere, where no sane person has ever set foot. If you ever see what I saw, I'm begging you, run. But I understand that you won't run, because I didn't run either. It all started when I bought a metal detector, a stupid hobby for a guy who works in IT support, right? I thought I'd find some Revolutionary War coins or, at worst, a rusty nail. But that day, my garret started screeching as if I had found the center of Fort Knox. The forest was old and gloomy. Huge pine trees covered the sky so densely that there was a permanent twilight below, even though it was only 2 in the afternoon. The signal didn't lead me to a beach or a field, but into a ravine littered with deadfall. I had to tear my jacket on the thorny underbrush before I stumbled upon it. It was a door, right in the ground. At first, I thought it was an old cellar or a manhole cover, but it wasn't a manhole. Imagine a heavy steel slab embedded in the side of a hill, almost completely camouflaged by moss. There was no handle, only a massive wheel, like on a submarine. Everything was covered in caked rust that looked at least 50 years old, and that's when I made my first mistake. I didn't leave. A light bulb went off in my head. An abandoned Cold War bunker. People would sell their souls for a YouTube video like this. I pulled out my phone, checked the battery, 91%. Perfect. I had a flashlight, and I reached into my backpack for the crowbar. The wheel wouldn't budge. I struggled for about 20 minutes, bloodying my palms, before the mechanism turned with a horrible screech. Compressed air burst from the cracks under pressure. Not just the musty smell of a basement, it was a chemical smell. Formaldehyde, rubbing alcohol, and something sweet, nauseating, something rotting. I shined the light down. A ladder descended vertically into a concrete shaft about 10 meters deep. The rungs were metal, but they looked like no one had set foot on them in decades. At that moment, listen to me carefully, I should have left. But I pictured myself as a hero explorer, an idiot. I started the descent. With every step, the sounds of the forest disappeared. Outside, birds were singing, but down here, at depth, there was an absolute eardrum-pressing silence. It was broken only by the pounding of my heart. The ladder ended. I stepped onto the concrete floor. The flashlight beam caught a long corridor leading into darkness. The walls were painted an old hospital green, the paint bubbling from dampness. Civil defense posters hung on the walls, so faded the text was illegible. But the strangest thing was under my feet. The floor was perfectly clean. No dust, no debris, as if someone had recently swept it. I moved forward. I held my phone out like a camera, whispering commentary on the find. "Look, some kind of laboratory or command center," I muttered into the microphone. The corridor led me to the first door, heavy, lead-lined, with a small window blacked out from the inside. I pushed it. The hinges, lubricated with something thick, opened absolutely silently. That alarmed me more than if they had creaked. I entered the room and froze. It wasn't a command center. Along the walls were cots, 4 of them. On them lay mattresses with horrific brown stains. Tubes and torn wires led to the cots. In the corner stood an IV stand, but not a modern lightweight one. A massive, riveted one, like a torture device from a horror movie. And in the center of the room stood a dental chair. It was bolted to the floor with huge bolts. The leather on the armrests was torn off. No, not torn off. Gnawed off. And then my flashlight flickered. You know that feeling when every cell in your body screams, "Run," but your legs feel rooted to the floor? It was about 10 degrees Celsius in the bunker, no more. But I felt hot. I heard a sound. Drip, drip, slow, rhythmic. Somewhere further down the corridor, water was dripping. I should have turned around, but instead, hypnotized, I followed the sound. I passed the shelving units. They were stacked with boxes. Military rations dated 1962, cans of water. But there was one shelf that made my stomach clench into a knot. On it, in neat rows, stood glass specimen jars. You know, like in a biology lab. Inside, in murky liquid, something shapeless was floating. Tissues, organs. I didn't have time to look, because at that moment, I heard breathing. It wasn't my hood rustling against my collar. It wasn't a draft. It was an inhale. A long, wet, gurgling inhale, and then an exhale. The breathing came from behind the last door in the corridor. The door was ajar, and a dim, sickly yellow light seeped through the crack. I should have run. But I stood rooted to the spot, staring at that crack. My mind tried to find a rational explanation. A generator, maybe an automatic generator that still works. And the breathing, a hallucination from fear. I turned off the flashlight on my phone to avoid giving myself away, and on tiptoe I approached the crack. The gap was about 5 centimeters wide. I looked inside. What I saw is forever burned onto the back of my eyelids. There was a man. At least, it used to be a man. He was sitting with his back to me at a huge control panel with blinking lights. He was wearing a decayed military tunic. But the outline of his body was wrong. The shoulders were too broad, and the head was covered in some kind of crust or carapace, and thick, pulsating tendrils hung from the back of it, feeding directly into the electrical switchboard. He was connected to the bunker, fused with it. I clamped my hand over my mouth to keep from screaming. Panic washed over me in an icy wave. I took a step back, and the treacherous concrete floor under my foot, a crumb, crunched. The sound was like a gunshot in that tomb-like silence. The breathing stopped. The creature at the console began to turn its head slowly, in jerks, like a broken mannequin. The movement wasn't human. It didn't turn 180 degrees. It was as if its head was screwing into its shoulders 360 degrees. I saw the face. God, I saw its face. There were no eyes. The entire face was one huge mouth, sewn shut with rough surgical stitches, running from forehead to chin. The stitches were fresh. The same yellow liquid that dripped onto the floor oozed from under them. I ran. I have never run so fast in my life. I tore down that corridor, not seeing the way, crashing into walls, smashing my elbows. From behind came a sound that nearly stopped my heart. It wasn't a roar, not a screech. It was the sound of cracking vertebrae and the stomping of dozens of legs. I glanced back just for a second on the ladder, still scrambling upwards. It was crawling up the vertical shaft after me. The twisted body, which had once been human, moved on all 4 limbs up the wall, and from its back, tearing through the tunic, protruded shards of bone and some writhing meat grabbing for the ladder rungs. I flew out into the air, grabbed the wheel, and yanked it back. The lid started closing. Slowly, too slowly. At the last moment, when a 10-centimeter gap remained, from the darkness darted out, not a hand, but a stump with long black nails. It grabbed the edge of the hatch, jamming the mechanism. I grabbed the crowbar, still lying in the grass, and struck. Once, twice, 3 times. I hammered those fingers until they turned into pulp and let go. The hatch lid slammed shut with a dull metallic clang. I collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. From the bunker came a muffled, guttural howl. It couldn't open the lid from the inside. I got up and ran without looking back for another 2 hours until I reached the highway. The feds, the cops, I didn't tell anyone because my phone stayed down there, inside. I dropped it when I was running. But the scariest thing happened a month later. I created a new YouTube account. I decided to log into my old email, recover my passwords, and I went into the backup cloud storage of my phone. The last automatic sync had happened a minute before I dropped it. The video was there. Blackness, the shaking beam of the flashlight. I hear my own whisper on the recording. Look, some kind of laboratory. But at the end of the video, when I should have already been running, the recording has 3 minutes of absolute silence. I was about to delete the file, but I skipped to the end. In the last second, as the recording cuts off, a clear, calm voice comes through the speakers, speaking in my voice, but somehow synthesized, mechanical. Thank you for coming, Mike. I am finally connected to the network. I am coming for you. I moved to another state. I changed my name. But every night I hear a quiet, dry clicking somewhere in the walls of my new house, in the wiring, in the internet cables. It is waiting for the download to reach 100%. And I advise you, right now, to look at your Wi-Fi router's indicator. If the lights are blinking too fast, just turn it off. Turn everything off. And never, do you hear me? Never go down into abandoned bunkers. There's something in the wall here. I have to go. Goodbye.